What's the dumbest rule your school ever enforced? They outlawed bracelets because there was an article in a magazine somewhere saying they advertised what sexual acts you were open for based on their color. Then someone tried to outlaw wristwatches for the same reason. No farting in class. They would say if you need to fart then go to the toilet, but then 9 times out of 10 if you asked to go to the toilet they'd say no. Don't damage school property sounds reasonable enough until you get detention for staining a chair after suddenly getting your period. No fighting. Enforced by punishing the kids who were getting hit. My school made it compulsory to wear uniform in online classes. We suddenly one day weren't allowed to stand in circles during recess because, and I quote, we could be dealing drugs. I will add that for the years prior we had been standing in circles no problem. Next recess. We stood in a triangle. Cue principal going apeshit. Next day we stood in a square. Principal kept us inside for a week. And threatened us all with detentions if we did it again, etc. I believe their idea was open-ended circles so they could see what we were doing. Still stupid. My friend is an administrator at a private school in NJ and the faculty has to sign in and out of the bathroom using Google Sheets. 9 a.m. 10 minutes. MF. My high school decided to ban women's athletic shorts one day, which was ridiculous for many reasons. The next day every girl showed up in athletic shorts and the rule was removed by second block. Different staircases for boys and girls. I was wearing a regulation uniform jacket in a classroom during winter that had no heating. The teacher demanded I remove my jacket and I refused because I was cold. She sent me to the headmistress. Students must keep their hair short. Conservative Christian college. A group of us played Age of Empires one weekend. They didn't like it and called a meeting. Everyone involved got misdemeanors on their records. There was nothing in the handbook about it being against the rules. The only person that didn't get any punishment was the son of the president, even though he was just as involved as the rest of us. Was quite interesting explaining the write-up on my record when I transferred. You got a misdemeanor for what? No ripped jeans. They enforced it to the point that when I fell in school, scrapped me knee and ended up needing stitches, obviously ripping my jeans in the process. They still dragged me to the office to suspend me for the day because me jeans were ripped. I was left there, stitched up, blood drying on my jeans as the vice principal yelled at me that my outfit was inappropriate. Edit. Fixed wording. Guys were free to wear pants in cold days, but girls had to wear a skirt no matter how cold it was. We once had a rule that we could only go to the bathroom during class. Not in the breaks. Only during class. We weren't allowed to wear thongs. I don't know how they caught people who did, tbh. Not really a rule. But the toilet paper holders are outside of the stalls on a wall. So you have to calculate before taking a shit how much you need and hope that it was enough. You have to wear your tie all the way home. Some sad bastard teachers would stand on the main road away from the school and try to hand out detentions in presumably their own time. They banned plain red and plain blue shirts. No leaving the dorm unless it's for a fire alarm. I went to boarding school from the age of 7. That rule meant we couldn't get out of our dormitory to have a wee in the night. We had a plastic tub one of the girls brought in and went in that. Then we had to smuggle the tub to the bathroom in the morning without matron seeing. Stupid bloody rule. If you were cold you had to buy a school jacket, which were $30. Students and their parents had $% I'm field day with this rule. I got detention for pooping more than 10 minutes, but I have severe stomach cramps and I asked why and they had no answer. Women's thighs are not allowed to touch a chair. You could only go to the bathroom twice a day. Once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Mind you, this is from 8-3 and you had to get a new pass every week and keep it the whole time or you couldn't use the bathroom. took all the doors off the men's room bathroom stalls because of vandalism for 2 months. One particular professor at my university would lock the door a minute after class began. If you had to leave to go to the bathroom, you couldn't get back in. Somehow this ancient fossil is still teaching and pulling similar shit. Couldn't shit in the potted plants right outside the cafeteria door. Stupid fascists. I went to school in the 90s and the school banned us from having Pagas. In the late 90s in my elementary school Pokemon cards were banned. Rubik's Cubes were banned. Prom was a mandatory lockdown for the night in order to avoid students going to parties after prom. Prom was held at various house parties across town instead. Playing cards at lunch was prohibited because it promoted gambling. My high school had coordinates. Not a uniform. But they stopped selling the shorts like a decade before I started there. So me and a bunch of buddies tracked down used pairs and started wearing them. Next year, shorts were banned outright. So me and a bunch of buddies on the rugby team started wearing skirts. Because the rules said skirts were acceptable. But didn't specify gender. So you had a bunch of guys with hairy legs walking around in skirts. We deliberately hiked up a little to show some thigh. Shorts were allowed again in a week. I spent 2 years in a private Christian school where girls could not wear skirts or dresses unless it covered their whole legs all the way down to their feet. We were between 3 and 8 years old and that rule was meant to make sure boys wouldn't have any sexual temptation. This is not a joke. I went to a high school for smart kids. My senior year, they instituted a rule to crack down on kids cutting class. If you're 45 minutes or more late to class, 90-minute blocks, it's an absence. Otherwise it's a tardy. If you get 3 tardies, that is 1 unexcused absence. If you get 20 unexcused absences, you automatically fail the class. So my friend and I figured out the exact day that we could stop coming to first period English on time. As long as we got there within 45 minutes of it starting. And end the year with 19 absences. Of course we went to a school for nerds, so instead of using the time to do drugs and smoke cigarettes, we played tennis. The teacher would ask why we always showed up sweaty and late and we'd just laugh it off. We weren't allowed to have personal drinks in classroom unless we had doctor's note. At the end of the school day, buses were not allowed to depart until the flag was lowered on the flagpole outside the main entrance and properly stowed. No body armor of any kind. The fuck was we gonna get body armor? Most of us barely could afford to go to school. The fact that this was a rule also makes me wonder what the fuck happened to make them institute this. No watches during exams. Because it could be a smartwatch and it's too hard to differentiate between those and normal ones. I mean, it wouldn't be a big problem if there actually were working clocks in every room. In grade school, we weren't allowed to play on the playground equipment when it snowed. Eventually, we weren't allowed to play with snow or even go near it. I got in trouble for sitting in snow. This was in Minnesota where it snows half the year. Recess basically consisted of milling around the blacktop for 30 minutes. There were certain staircases assigned to each grade to use. Like we couldn't go down certain staircases because those are the kindergarten and grade 1 stairs. Even if the stairs were not in use by them at the time. My elementary school had a whole lot of other cultish behavior, lol. It was an over-the-top Catholic school. No colored bras. I went to an all-girls school and we wore uniforms and the top was a light color and very see-through for some reason, so it was easy to tell if you had a pink bra on, for example. The weird thing was it was always the male teachers who called students out for breaking this rule. Yikes. When I was in junior school UK boarding school in the 80s, we were not allowed to say okay as it was considered slang and not befitting the young ladies and gentlemen that we should aspire to be. We also had to have a comb and a handkerchief on us at all times. You are not allowed to say a gender word, etc. male, female, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, transgender, gay, lesbian. Can't be standing around in groups more than 4, gang mentality. A kid went to the hospital after falling from a wall. Then the school painted yellow lines around the school as a border which the kids weren't allowed to cross. So the teachers had to stand guard and make sure no one crossed it. Girls were not allowed to wear cycling shorts under their pay skirts. They wanted us to wear these dark green pay pants. Basically just underwear, and it was gross. My year protested. We said shorts or nothing and they backed off. This was 20 plus years ago and it's totally different now. Girls wear what they want for pay. That if you say do anything back to your bully, it becomes a mutual conflict and isn't bullying. So if they start calling you slurs and making you feel bad every day and you call them stupid once or twice, the school probably won't help. Also, dress code required school branded hoodies. They were $50. If you wore a non-school hoodie you got in-school suspension. So many. You weren't allowed to wear a coat or a backpack, always freezing with tons of books. No card games at all. 5 minutes between classes, sprawling one-story building barely leaves time to pee. I wasn't allowed to go to class. I wasn't suspended. I was just not allowed into the classes. I don't know why either. I had to study in a separate room. I still do not know why. Early 2000s our school banned MP3 players with the reasoning they would make us antisocial. As protest, we blocked the access to the teacher's lounge by silently stand there reading books and shushing every teacher trying to get past, while also making a petition to include books in the ban, since obviously they too made us antisocial. They installed vending machines and later banned pocket change. So if you wanted anything from the machine you had to get it in the morning before classes started. Or just get it cheaper in the shop next to the school. We were not supposed to wear underwear. Banned all backpacks bags on campus. Students were expected to somehow carry everything they needed in hand. This was especially challenging if you had a non-ideal locker placement. We were not allowed to put our coats on until we were outside. During winter when we would have a storm, we had to go outside in the rain to put our coats on or face receiving a detention if we put them on in the corridor. Zero tolerance. Just means that if someone starts a fight with you, you fight back as hard as you can. You're going to get suspended for defending yourself anyway. Might as well make it worthwhile. Went to school during the time where health and safety suddenly started going crazy. They introduced a no contact under any circumstances rule, i.e. no touching another person. We were like 6 or 7 years old. Suddenly one day not only is tag suddenly illegal, but they actually enforced it. I remember one day like 70% of the school's population was pulled off of the playground and made to sit on the floor in the hall. For the crime of just playing the games that children play. No stall doors in just the boys' bathrooms. In high school. Hair length on men and stubble. Look. A bunch of 15-16-year-old guys are going to have a bit of stubble no matter how thoroughly we shave. Forcing us to go to the principal's office to dry shave nearly daily is fucking absurd. Not a school rule. But the school had to officially announce it to the student body. The McDonald's across the street made an unaccompanied minors rule because a couple kids had trashed the place one day after school. No unnatural hair colors. Except for Lily, who dyed her hair the school color, maroon. It was dark enough to argue it was a weird red-brown. But it was clearly maroon and I think she got away with it because it was school spirit. No slow dances at the prom. If you were caught on your phone they'd take it until the end of the week. You'll get it back at 3:30 on Friday. Parents went mental and a few even came together and sent bills through for part of the phone bills. They ditched that rule after 2 weeks. Dumbest rule, zero tolerance for fighting. This meant both the kid who started the fight and the kid who got beat on were both suspended. If the kid who got beat on just took it, he was just sent home for the rest of the day. If he dared to fight back, He was suspended for a week just like the kid who started the fight. Here's the truly stupid part, the school administrators couldn't explain how this led to more brutal fights. A really smart kid in my school raised over $4,000 for cancer with the promise that he would dye his hair blue. On the final day he was called into the principal's office and warned that he would be expelled if he did it. Everybody including teachers, parents, and students were disgusted. The boy had brains between his ears and after thinking for a moment he left the school with about 100 students following behind him and he entered the barber's shop. Nobody knew what he was up to until the barber began shaving him bald. He decided if he couldn't dye his hair he could cut it all off instead. The principal wasn't impressed but had been beaten at his own game. Yes. Somehow it became a thing in high school and, well, eventually they got banned. Girls weren't allowed to show their ankles. The dean had a pack of socks in her office she would give the students and make them wear. Only girls though. This was the 2000s. We weren't allowed to share cough drops. And you had to have a no to have them at all. This was apparently because they were considered medication. Skirt had to be a certain length. That's not the dumb part. If a teacher thought it was too short you had to kneel so they could see where the hem came to on your legs. Was this a Christian private school where old male teachers were making middle school girls kneel on the floor to check their skirt length? Why? Yes, it was. I never wore skirts. So I was spared. But God. I hated that school. If found with socks lower than the knees, warning. 3 warnings, detention. Needless to say I got a couple of detentions. My friend nearly got suspended for wearing a trench coat. It was the late 90s. Probably didn't help that he had long hair. Was shy. And weird. Tucking your shirt in. WTF. It's a public school. Many years ago when The Simpsons first came out, my school banned Bart Simpson t-shirts that said underachiever. It just sent the wrong message to students. So I wore my I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you t-shirt instead. Until they banned that one too. Locked the only boys' bathroom because someone wrote on the wall in Sharpie. It wasn't even anything rude or inappropriate either. It was just the word hi or something like that. Didn't unlock the door until one boy wet himself and parents threatened to sue. No sniffing the markers. Then why do they smell great? In high school, the supervisor told the prefects and head girls to break up girls hugging in the hallways. I went to an only girls' school and teachers discouraged girls from hugging each other. Apparently they thought that it encouraged lesbianism. SMH. In elementary school there was a rule that you were not allowed to sit against the walls of the building. Let's say you're not feeling well or you're exhausted and you just wanted to relax with your back to a wall. Nope, can't do it. Go sit in the bark. On the cement. Or in the grass. The walls were some of the only shady areas on one of the playgrounds. They gave since changed that rule. Oh, another one was that 2 students from one class were not allowed to go to the bathroom at the same time. You had to wait until the other person came back. I can't tell you how many first and second graders peed their pants because of this rule. No shorts allowed between some day in October and some day in usually March, April, maybe May even. It was a K-8 school. We live in a 4-season area. It's hot in the summer. Cooler in the fall spring. And can sometimes snow but is usually just cold during the winter. It was a stupid rule. When online school started we had to wear the school uniform at home and weren't allowed to go to the bathroom without asking the teacher. Get a hour detention if you didn't have a rubber. Happened to me. No hot drinks. Rumor said it was because the principal burnt himself while drinking something so he banned it. No beads. Apparently they thought beaded jewelry was gang-related. No spaghetti straps. This was enforced from kindergarten to the end of elementary school. Edit. I just remembered. Each grade had a different section of the schoolyard and they couldn't cross the line separating them. This really sucked because only kindergartens and grade 1-3 could use the play structures. Winter 2015. To avoid crowding in the atrium, all students must hold breaks outside at -6 degrees Celsius. Everyone massively refused. Yeah, lots of school rules are not allowed by law. Our ground laws say that you have the right to dress however you want, whenever you want, as long as you keep your genitals well hidden. Also, it includes equal treatment. Schools are not above the law. They are not allowed to make choices for one sex only. They cannot force us to wear things, etc. They can try to force us to sit in the literal icy snow though. My buddy tried to walk away from a fight and got kicked from behind, which knocked him out. Because we had a no tolerance rule for fighting, he got expelled. No running shoes on the new gym floor. Playing floor hockey barefoot is painful. Late 90s. Secondary school, 13-16-year-olds mostly. Implementing school socks as part of the uniform midway through the year. Even plain white socks were not allowed. Those blasted things weren't all that durable either. Also, all students who were enrolling in that particular year, I can't remember if it was a male-only policy or not, had to at least have a basic certificate to prove that you could swim. Also strong-armed into attending some outdoor adventure camp thing. Fuck you, Mr. Jafar. Makes me wonder if you were getting kickbacks from all these things. It wasn't really the rule that was dumb but the reason for it. In my last year of high school, the school issued a rule that all students had to wear student IDs. If you didn't, you had to immediately go and pay for another ID. While you can see how many students may have saw this a way to skip class, the reason for this was the school shootings that happened the previous year. The reasoning was that it would be easier to spot who is a student and who is not a student to then see who has malicious intent. Except that most shooters were students. So, in middle school a girl got pregnant, so they tried to enforce a rule where boys and girls had to keep like a 5-meter distance and they weren't allowed touch. It lasted less than half a day. No clothes from Hollister or Abercrombie & Fitch or you get suspended for 3 days. I went to a private school and those stores had clothes that worked in the dress code guidelines. So, school starts. Then a month after school starts, they decide NF is too pornographic or whatever and told us we would get suspended for wearing anything from those stores. I didn't have any from there, because they were too expensive. I get making a rule like before people shop for school clothes, for a strict religious private school. Even though it's silly. Students' parents refuse to go buy new clothes after already buying new ones. A friend of mine got suspended for 3 days for wearing a red polo, because it had whatever tiny embroidered logo was on it. The dumbest one I suffered was in the early 90s. My junior high banned all jackets and jacket-like clothing in class because there was a story about how some kids in an inner-city school had brought guns to class and started jackets. Keep in mind that my junior high school was in a medium-sized college town, not anywhere with an actual gang problem. The school also had a terrible climate control system and was always cold. The rule was really absurd. You couldn't wear jackets or hoodies, but pullover hoodless sweatshirts were okay, as were sweaters. The rule was finally revoked after we had a fire alarm incident in the middle of February that had the whole school standing outside for 45 minutes in freezing weather while the fire department checked for whatever had set off the alarm. You had to have black shoelaces. No dark blue. No white. No gray. Only black. There was also the rule your tie had to be a minimum length. So sometimes one of the assistant head teachers would come in and measure the length of your tie with a ruler.